let me introduce Dov Seidman.
Good afternoon. Thank you, David, for those kind words. I'm going to ask to turn on the lights so that we can connect. It's great to see you. I was born in San Francisco, so it's special, as always, to come home. And we are at the epicenter of where technologists and communication technology has not only dramatically sped up the pace at which the world moves, it has reshaped the world, reshaped it. It operates differently. Frankly, the world has been reshaped faster than we have been yet able to reshape ourselves, our companies, and our relationships. And I want to talk about the profound implications of that very idea. First, a bit about what shaped me. I know what you're thinking, and if I were you, I'd be thinking the same thing. The shorts were short, and the hair was big. That's me in high school with Lionel Richie. That was my introduction to hard work and to becoming an entrepreneur. Every Saturday, my partner Ruben and I went to Lionel Richie's house, and we detailed painstakingly, with care and love, his cars. And he paid us $50 a car, and that was a lot of money at the time. And that's how I was going to put myself through college. Back then, we used cassettes. He actually put the cassette of All Night Long, and I heard the music before he even wrote the words. But there's more to this story. Ruben was a great student, and he got into UCLA, and I could not. I grew up with a challenge. I was dyslexic. I got a 970 on the SAT, and I was so mortified that I hunkered down, and I studied for 6 more months. And my score improved dramatically from a 970 to a 980. So I could not crack 1,000. So I wrote UCLA a letter, and I said, I need to stay in Los Angeles to keep washing Lionel Richie's cars with Ruben, who you've admitted. I plead hardship with you. Please take me. And perhaps to their credit, they did, on one condition, that I would enroll to begin college in remedial English. But if forever a seeming curse would turn out to be a blessing, it did so in my case because they let me in with just 1 day before classes commenced. And all the popular classes like history, psychology, economics were oversubscribed, but I would have flunked them. I couldn't read 500 pages. The one class that was wide open was the moral philosophy class, because that just rewards you for reading 10 pages over and over and over again and thinking about it. But I got lit up. And it's a privilege for David to talk about my book. I didn't read a book cover to cover until I was 17. I never decided to become a good writer or a good reader. That was a byproduct of a tenacious love affair with the ideas at the center of philosophy. And at the center of the philosophy, mainly moral philosophy that I studied, was, of course, issues of right versus wrong and good versus bad. But it was the human condition and what sustains human endeavor that really fascinated me. And then there was one more idea that fascinated me. It was the idea of freedom. We use this euphemism today called disruption, but isn't disruption just another word for a revolution? What is a revolution? Revolutions are about 3 things. This is Delacroix's La Liberté, the famous painting of the French Revolution. Revolutions are about 3 things. They are about disrupting, overthrowing the status quo. Because you're in the grip of an idea that things could be better, or maybe they should be better. But ultimately, revolutions are about freedom. Freedom from the way things are operating. And right now, because of the way the world has been reshaped, mainly with technology, we are creating not just income inequality, we are creating something more fundamental, freedom inequality. Because I believe that freedom is not only the most fundamental human need, it's our most fundamental human quest and aspiration. And right now we are creating an unprecedented amount of freedom from Salesforce, freedom from installed software. Chatter, freedom from corporate communications doing all the talking, because everybody gets to plug and play and talk. Uber, freedom from taxi cabs. Airbnb, freedom from hotel chains. TiVo, freedom from networks saying you are going to watch these commercials. And if Amazon, freedom from the neighborhood store. I can go on, but if you look at every one of these innovations and disruptions, what they are creating is freedom from whatever captured you before. And freedom from is created by tearing things down, casting off. And we can cast off the current regime, hierarchical power, anything command, anything capturing, with unprecedented ease. But the freedom that we really cherish is not freedom from. The freedom in the US Constitution is freedom to pursue happiness. The freedom we cherish is to innovate, to take a risk and fail and not get fired. Freedom to be yourself on the job. Freedom to pursue your dreams, and freedom to be yourself, whatever your religious or sexual or any other orientation. And while freedom from is created by casting off structure, freedom to, since the beginning of time, is enabled by shared fundamental values, a certain type of governance, a certain kind of leadership, and that which brings us together. This idea so captivated me that when I started my company 21 years ago, I took Delacroix and I painted my vision as an entrepreneur of La Liberté. It was more politically correct, as you can see. We covered up Lady Liberty. But the scales of justice represent my devotion to the idea of creating the right relationship between that which creates freedom from and that which really animates and inspires freedom to, and how to do that at scale. And with that, I'm here to just share with you one idea that I think is particularly apt and relevant to a reshaped world. Let me illustrate this idea with a story. How many of you have flown Southwest Airlines? All of you almost. The single most profitable airline in US history, no matter how turbulent the skies or the industry is, those guys keep soaring. They go up and down, like everything, but by and large, they've been doing great. Herb Kelleher, their founder, the first thing he said when he founded the company is, I am not in charge. I'm going to create a culture where everybody's in charge. That was a disruptive idea 40-some years ago. And to tell you what this looks like 40-some years later, a few years ago, I landed in Las Vegas on a Southwest Airlines flight. And when the plane came to the gate, the flight attendant came on the loudspeaker with passion and said, listen, passengers, we've done research at Southwest Airlines, and we have a secret. Before you deplane, if each and every one of you will simply turn around and cross your seatbelts one over the other, you will have good luck at the gambling tables. Okay, we laughed the way you did, but then we did it. We did it. Now, there's a federal regulation that the next flight can't take off until seatbelts are passed. Through how she connected with us, we are delivering compliance with law on behalf of her airline. It also turns out that they turn their planes around 6 minutes faster than their nearest rival. How long would it have taken her to go up and down the aisles and do it herself? 6 minutes. Through how she connected with us, we are delivering a competitive operational advantage to her airline. They also make a customer brand promise in the marketplace. Home on time, no frills, safe, and fun. I had a lot of fun. I laughed. So whatever they promised, I received, so that deepened my loyalty because I experienced consonance and not dissonance. But the moral of the story is this. There's no manual that instructs her to tell the gambling joke when she lands in Las Vegas. She does not get paid extra for doing that. She is so free to contribute her character and creativity, in this case, even her sense of humor, without the fear that if she tells a joke that falls flat, she's going to get fired. They've created such an abundance of trust and mission orientation that everybody is innovating with different ways to connect with how they get people out of their seats to deliver something of value. Do you think the world would be a better place if we had more of these behaviors? And if more institutions were able to inspire and animate them, yes? Great, I knew you would think that. Well, sadly and unfortunately, these behaviors are still not the norm. They are more the exception to the rule. We've got work to do. Many things I could point out to justify that point, but I think you would agree that people behave that way when their heart is in the game, when they care, right? They're engaged. And right now, 7 out of 10 employees are not engaged on the job, and 2 out of those 7 are so actively disengaged that they're on Facebook or something similar saying some pretty nasty things about their company. $400 billion of lost productivity. I know we have a jobs crisis, but this is a careers crisis. People with a job who are leaning out and not leaning in. People with a job who don't find sufficient meaning in it. And they're not creating, through their discretionary effort and innovation, more jobs for their cousins and friends and uncles, etc. Ladies and gentlemen, the largest business problem that we are facing is not a business problem. It's a human problem. Human beings, not inspired, not engaged. Frankly, this is also leadership malpractice. And if it's not leadership malpractice, it's leadership in the grip of the wrong leadership models, ones that are NA, not applicable in a reshaped world. Here we are celebrating customer centricity and customer success, but 3 out of 4 customers are not engaged with the brands that they shop from because they're not loyal to them, citing broken promises and a loss of trust. Citizens are not engaged with government. We have a crisis of leadership because there's low trust and engagement with anything institutional or of traditional authority, be it government, big companies, people's bosses. How did we get so disconnected in a world that is so connected? When I ask questions like this, I sometimes think that the best way to do before we go forward to look for the answer is to pause and go back. Because this calls into question the way capitalism is working. And I believe that we have disconnected from the fundamental idea. We live in a universalistic, capitalist, democratic society, but have we scaled capitalism? Adam Smith, many of you might be surprised to learn, how many of you have been taught that Adam Smith was an economist? After all, he wrote The Wealth of Nations, the treatise, the manifesto that we've used to scale our marketplace. Adam Smith was the chairman of the moral philosophy department at Glasgow University. His first book was The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And he argued that if you want dynamism and sustained innovation, you have to scale morality, values, shared values, governance. And if you can't do that and you don't do capitalism within a moral framework, you will lurch from crisis to crisis and from greed and extreme to something more stable and then greed again. And I believe that we disconnected from this fundamental idea because we found ourselves in the grip of another idea. Instead of scaling the father of capitalism's conception, we embraced the godfather of capitalism's conception. How many of you have seen The Godfather at least 3 times? 5 times? Anybody want to shout out the most famous line from the movie? Leave the gun, take the cannoli, right? You know that one? But isn't it? It's not personal, it's just business. If we want to go to funerals and hear that he was a jerk boss and a loving husband, so capable of love, and the most ruthless negotiator, but a caring father, capable of care, if we think that we can create 2 spheres, this is our personal sphere, where it's all about behavior and how we relate and treat and how much honesty and transparency and trust we can foster in our personal relationships and friendships and family. But there's another sphere that's not immoral, it's just amoral, where the business of business is just business with different rules. This is about what we should do, and this is about what we can and cannot do. Now, if we can maintain a separate sphere of just business, then greed is good. Just do it, I don't care how, my way or the highway. These are rational strategies if and only if we can maintain a separate sphere. And I think for many years we operated under the assumption that such a sphere is both philosophically and practically possible. And what we're learning in the reshaped world is that practically it's not possible, and philosophically it's not working either. David Hume, another Scottish philosopher, a contemporary of Adam Smith, said that the moral imagination diminishes with distance. The moral imagination diminishes with distance. It would follow then that as distance decreases, the moral imagination must and is increasing. And I think that that's the world we're living in today, that we are morally activated because distance has shrunk, and it's shrinking to almost, we're all in a crowded theater, metaphorically speaking, where no one ought to shout fire. What does this look like today? Do you see the technology in this picture? A revolution towards freedom. One vegetable vendor with 7 or so friends armed with cell phone cameras were able to spark a revolution towards freedom throughout the entire Middle East. One banker at his desk can lose $2 billion and introduce volatility in global markets. And recently, one guy from the Midwest flies down to Zimbabwe and shoots and kills a very popular lion, Cecil, and moral outrage around the world about this guy, so much so that the airlines that allow people to fly back with their trophy kills, stopped that policy. Worldwide moral discussion around the propriety and right and wrongness of killing a lion in Zimbabwe. That's the world we live in. We've never lived in a world where wealth is so concentrated, but power so diffuse. We've never lived in a world where people can make history, record history, amplify history, and publicize history in one moment. We've never lived in a world where the behavior of any one person can affect so many others so far away like never before. Because technology has reshaped the world and moved us from connected to interconnected to interdependent. And interdependence is a moral and ethical reality because we rise and fall together. Anytime you're in a relationship where you affect somebody deeply, where you can rise or fall together, that is a new marketplace, a more moral reality. And I think that's the world we're living in. We've never lived in a world where strangers, through apps, can be brought into physical, intimate proximity. Masseuses into our homes, strangers into our cars. That's the world we're living in. And if you think this idea of being able to use technology platforms to create revolution, every one of these famous, powerful brands, you know what they have in common? Every one of them was forced to do a 180 on a critical policy, on an important strategic initiative, because people went online and protested them for their behavior. Do you remember when Netflix decided that things are going so well, they were adding subscribers faster than they could count, and they said, how about a little $5 or so price increase? You remember that? 800,000 Netflix subscribers bolted in 48 hours. When is the last time you saw 800,000 people in unison come together in collective action and point in the same direction and march? And you know what Reed Hastings did to his credit? He paused and he reflected and he said, you know what? Maybe our relationship with our marketplace was too command and control, too one-way, us sitting in a room deciding it's time for a price increase. How about we replace arrogance with humility and start to have two-way dynamics? And they went on a journey of learning, because in this world, how you come back from mistakes, including how you apologize, is the source of value creation. And now they're winning Emmys and shining again as a company. Paul Pullman is the CEO of Unilever. They connect with 2 million customers a day. Not too long ago, we were having lunch, and I know that Mark Benioff has also had a similar conversation with Paul about this, because he paused as a leader to reflect on the reshaped world, and he said, you know, I was thinking that Mubarak in Egypt back then had a military. He had tanks, and it still took them 17 days to get rid of him. What if consumers and employees don't like how Unilever is being run? I don't have a military. The fact that a CEO is asking these questions that they never asked before tells you something about leadership and what they're struggling with today. But more importantly is the insight in terms of the trends that he's taking his company. The future is about young people, because he's noticing that his customers are 30 and under, and they're going to stay that way for a while. And speaking of young people, let me introduce you to Martha Payne. I encountered her when she was 9 years old. Martha was a Scottish schoolgirl, and she did not think that the food in her school was sufficiently nutritious. So she convinced her father to let her bring his camera and take pictures of the food and blog about it. Do you know what the school did? They went to the school board, and they got permission to shut her down. Freedom from? She was not even free to express herself. So Jamie Oliver, the famous chef, got involved, and a few others, and a million people started to blow wind in her sails. The school reversed their policy, started to serve gourmet food, which is an oxymoron in that part of the world, and I've lived there so I can tell you. But more importantly, it was nutritious. And then children all over the world emulated this leadership practice, and other school kids are getting their schools to serve better food. She launched a foundation that raised extra money for malnutrition kids in Malawi at the age of 9. And if you go onto her blog today, it says, I am a future workforce leader. People don't wait anymore to be made as leaders or born as leaders with one vice president title after another. Leaders today are self-made. Look at these 4 children. Look at these 4 children. They're amazing, and there's so many more that I keep tracking. One of them didn't think that 17 should Photoshop pictures of young girls, and she got them to stop. Another one felt that DC Comics should have more pictures of female heroines and got them to do that. Another one got the big soft drink companies to take carcinogens out of sports drinks. And Cody Pope wrote a letter to every NFL owner, because he wanted freedom from his local team, and he said, give me a reason why I should root for you. And he received letters back from owners who had to give him a reason to root for him, and he made his choice that way. He did. I know you laugh, but a kid can get an owner to say, please root for us. That's a new world. So where are we? I think we're in a new era. We're in the era of behavior. We're in the era of human behavior. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't behavior always matter? Of course it did. Our grandparents taught us that. What I'm saying is behavior matters more than ever, and it matters in ways it never has before. And from an economic standpoint, if you look at this from a marketplace standpoint, sharing economy, all these economies that we're talking about, I think that we have gone from an industrial economy where we hired people for their hands, their labor, to a knowledge economy where we hired people for their heads, cognitive skills, the ability to think, the ability to have knowledge and expertise. But I think we are now entering a human economy where we are hiring people for their hearts. There's a Talmudic expression that things that come from the heart enter the heart. When doctors apologize and they don't mean it because it's mechanistic and it doesn't come from the heart, they get sued more. When doctors apologize, and we've researched this sincerely, they get sued less. Behaviors that come from the heart, that go into our values and come out, are the ones that really, really make a difference. Now, if you needed any proof that we're in this new economy, the marketing departments of companies, their job is to put their finger on the zeitgeist, on the social pulse. And one company after another is declaring their humanity. It suggests that they were maybe inhuman before. If you're saying you're human, what were you before? But putting that aside, Chevron is the human energy company. Dow is the human element. Cisco is the human network, right? Ally Bank is We Speak Human. Samsung designed for humans. One company after another is declaring their humanity. It's time to bank human again. Let's be more human. And here's a French company saying you could drink humanity. You could literally imbibe it. But the point here is that one company after another is telling the marketplace, work here, buy from us, invest in us because of our humanity, who we are deep down, and how we manifest and personify that humanity through our practices. And you might be thinking it's one thing to proclaim your humanity, and it's another thing to translate that proclamation into leadership behaviors, individual behaviors, policies, and practices. But that is where competitive stakes lie today. Many of you were struck probably by the fact that the New York Times really dug into Amazon, right? But look at how it was framed. This was not an X-ray. This was an MRI of the innermost workings of a company. And the terms of debate were economic and humanity. In this case, we're seeing articles about the article framed in terms of an inhuman economy. That's a new world. And these practices weren't new. What's new is that we're stopping to examine them and rethink them. Many of you probably go online from time to time and search on Webster's. What's the most, you search words. So every year, Webster's does a contest, and they publish at the end the word that was most searched based on the year before. In 2013, it was selfie. Do you know what the word was last year? Anybody want to know? Anybody know? It was culture. Culture. That's the most human thing of all, creating shared language, values. Culture is what allows people to share a narrative, a story, a journey. Shared conceptions of right and wrong and how we should be together, culture. If there's a rape, God forbid, on campus, we don't talk about the boy, we talk about fraternity culture. If a policeman puts somebody in a chokehold, we don't talk about that cop, we talk about police culture. Sony gets hacked from Korea, and we're talking about celebrity and Hollywood culture. There's a hazing incident in a National Football League locker room. We're talking about locker room culture in a world where the locker room is no longer locked. What's interesting is we now no longer want to talk about the apple, but the tree and the roots from which the apple fell. The new lens is we are going deep, and we are obsessed with the innermost workings of institutions, companies, and the people who work there and lead them. And if you're with me that we're in a new era, Einstein gave us the best advice. Anytime you're in a new era, forget the reset button, forget the reboot, forget the reform. There was a lot of talk about reforming the economy after the financial crisis. You have to have the leadership courage to rethink. Because when you're in a new era, you have to have the courage to let go of our habits of mind and behavior that propelled us in the prior era and reimagine and invent new ones. So with that, I'm going to share with you my one idea. It's a rethink. We grew up thinking that how is a question. How are you, buddy? How do I get from A to B? And we love counting with how. How much revenue, how much market share, how many friends, how many likes, how many followers. And that still matters. When how is an adverb, it's like window dressing on the noun, the things we like. But what if how were not just a question, but an answer? We'd go get a really good answer, and we'd compete with this answer. And I think that the way the world has been reshaped, it's made how an answer. Every tweet, we call it a tweet, it's a behavior. Every Facebook post, we call it a post, it's a behavior. When I say we're in the era of behavior, collaboration's a behavior, innovation's a behavior, a tweet's a behavior, delighting the customer is a behavior, all the ways in which we manifest and relate and communicate and do what we do, that's what I mean by behavior. And what I'm saying is we are now in an economy where competitive advantage, the ability to create value, has shifted to how we do what we do. Let me ask you a question. Think of the behavior you want in your respective organizations. Anybody want to throw out some capacities or qualities or behaviors you'd like to see more of in your peers? Just throw out, just blurt out some things. Love. Trust. What? Trust. Love, trust. What else? Empathy. What? Equity, respect. Less ego, empowerment. Let me ask you all a question. If you had a magic wand, or that wand that Parker had earlier in the keynote, and you could triple everybody's salary, would you get more love, respect, empathy, and trust? If you could triple everybody's salary, would you? If you said to everybody, now you two go in the room and don't emerge until you have love for each other. Won't work, right? Now, the things you want, you can't get with carrots and sticks. But carrots and sticks, back in the old economy, is what we used to get people to do things. It's not an accident. You know, carrots and sticks, they shift behavior. You give me enough carrots, I can get somebody to show up on time, work longer, and have fewer sick days, and give me more. But no amount of carrots elevate people. They shift behavior. Now, not later, more, not less. You put a product on sale, buy now, not later, more, not less. You watch a political attack ad, you vote left, not right, right, not left, 30 seconds later. We nudge people. We are great at shifting people. But elevating people, the only thing that's elevated people since the beginning of time is a mission worthy of their loyalty and dedication. It's a journey that they believe as a function of their purpose they belong on, and it's doing it with people they trust. And the behaviors that you asked for are behaviors you can't shift for, you can only elevate. IBM did a very large study, and the top 4 behaviors that they want more of, that CEOs want more of in order to win in this new marketplace, are all elevated behaviors. Collaboration, communication, creativity, flexibility. The World Economic Forum came out with a study, and they said, these are the skills that if you want to win in the 21st century, you're going to have to cultivate. And of course, the STEM skills are foundational. Of course, you need software and coders and engineers, software. But what about moralware? And they said that the real skills we want are characterological skills that come from character, grit, resiliency, innovation. These are the skills. And then they chastised and they said the whole ed tech community is focused on innovating in the foundational skills category, where we really need to invest our innovation agenda on how to cultivate and really get into and embed in the DNA of organizations the other competencies of character. Peter Drucker, the management guru, said there's a difference between doing the next thing right and the next right thing. We used to live in a time where one general would say, we're taking that hill. And everybody's job was to take that hill to do the next thing right. One football coach would say, we're running that play. And a CEO and his or her management team would say, these are the numbers we're going to hit. In that world, everybody's job is to do the next thing right. We now live in an interdependent world where everybody's job is to not do the next thing right, i.e. correctly, but to do the next right thing. You can program a computer and a machine to do the former. And Andrew McAfee spoke brilliantly earlier today about all the ways in which machines are outthinking, outprocessing, outperforming us. Let's declare victory and forfeit some things to them and focus on the things that only a human being can uniquely do, the next right thing. Now, we all know what that is in our friendships, our relationships, our marriages, etc. The challenge is not to do the next right thing. It's to do it at scale. And the reason businesses are invented is businesses are the greatest invention ever to do anything at scale. That's what businesses exist to do. And in Silicon Valley, venture capitalists are always asking young entrepreneurs, how are you going to scale your product? How are you going to scale your business? Has anybody here ever asked, how are you going to scale your values? How are you going to scale your values? So what's amazing about business is great at scaling. HRIS, ERP, TQM, Six Sigma, Kaizen, CSR, and here, CRM. These acronyms mean that business has taken a piece of business and said, oh, we can scale it by being systematic about it. And I think that the next frontier in the human economy are people getting together and figuring out how to not just declare their values, but embed them into their DNA so that they win through them. Interesting that Satya Nadella, I read something, and he's here speaking later today, and he's here at he's a technologist, as we think, and he said, culture is everything. And when he means culture, he doesn't mean let's become a great place to work. I like sushi at work. I like back rubs, massages, flexibility, work at home. These are all important indicators of humanity, that the company cares. But a great place to work does not mean it's a fair, honest, values-based, principled culture. That's deeper work. And one way to think about it is, you remember back in the day when Word and WordPerfect were having a battle of the killer apps? I know I'm dating myself. And every PC magazine was saying the battle of the killer apps. Bill Gates' genius was that he built Windows. Because if you have the right operating system, Word plus Excel plus PowerPoint plus email could work together in the service of a larger idea, worker productivity. And that's what he figured out. So by analogy, let's take all these elevated behaviors, let's consider them the killer apps of the 21st century, and then build a human operating system, a human organization that fires up these killer apps. And one way to do that is you still manage what you measure. You manage what you measure. So we recently did the largest study of behavior in organizations, large and small, public, not private, for-profit, non-profit. And we measured their humanity through 2 million observations of behavior from 36,000 people in 18 countries. We measured things like the presence of freedom too, and speaking up and trust, etc. And what was amazing is that organizations fell into 3 categories. The autocratic, blindly obedient ones. They are what they kind of sound like. A lot of top-down authority, do this or else. Then very rational, winning, motivation-oriented, all about success organizations, which were really prevalent. And then there were some that were really primarily human. Now, only 3% of companies are fully human, but we're at the beginning of an era. The other companies have great humanity. They just don't operate with humanity at all times and in everything, but it's there. Wonderful companies like Salesforce. But if you could become fully human, look what happens. You have less misconduct, the behavior you don't want, and so much more of the behavior you do want: innovation, loyalty, satisfied customers. And you get financial performance. The problem is, right now there's a big disconnect. Most CEOs experience humanity when those who are charged with getting the work done do not. The fact that so many admit to coercion is still high, but more people experience coercion. And this was an independent statistical analysis. So the last thing we need to rethink, if we have such a gap between those in charge and the experience of everybody else, don't you think that the thing we need to do is rethink some leadership in a reshaped world, new economy, that which elevates behavior? How about a few minutes on rethinking leadership? I've been doing that a lot lately, especially when I became a father. I'm really passionate, as I hope you can tell, about my work. But when I became a father, I asked myself a new question. What kind of company is my son going to maybe work at one day? And if he would have the privilege to be a leader, what kind of leader would he be? And as he grew up, he started reading how and multitasking and all that. And I'll tell you a story. that I think goes to the heart of what I'm here to talk about. When he was 5, his name is Lev, and he's watching live stream. Isn't that great? In New York. When he was 5, I was on the way to work, and my phone rings, and it's him. And allegedly, I left without kissing him goodbye. Now, you would think that a 5-year-old would be very emotional and emotive about this. Daddy, I'm mad at you. You didn't kiss me. How could you? Come back here, kiss me. You know what this phone call was all about? Daddy, this is your son, and I have a question for you. What kind of father does not kiss his son? Now, true. Right to the heart. And he's not having such great luck trying to impart these ideas to his sister. But think for a minute about a leader that inspires you. Shout out a quality that they have. What? Selfless. Yeah. What else? Guts, selfless. Perseverance, happy. Integrity. You see where we're going here? If we tripled all leadership salaries, you're going to get more integrity? I can go the same thing. We want elevated behaviors from leadership. Let me tell you about the leader that has always inspired me. He hailed in Oakland across the bridge. This is Crazy George Henderson. He invented, I think, the most appropriate and resonant and relevant model of 21st century leadership. He started the wave. How many of you participated in a wave in a stadium? You know, they're not done by the people who own the stadiums or the CEOs. It's usually 4 guys with a few too many beers or some soccer moms. There's a science of wave making. They don't happen in high school football stadium where one side cheers against the other. They happen in oval stadiums. In the southern hemisphere, they're counterclockwise. In the northern hemisphere, they're clockwise. Totally true. It takes 12 to 20 people to inspire a wave in the same section, but one person has to have a drum and beat it for what he believes in. Now, do you think you can do a wave this way? Stand up or I'll punch you. That doesn't work with everybody over there. They're far from his physical reach. I interviewed Crazy George. Do you think he had enough $20 bills? Here's 20, here's 20. Do you think he motivated the wave? Do you think he paid people $20 to stand up? No. Do you think he was non-transparent? I'd like you to stand up, but it's a secret. I won't tell you why. Do you think he did it with no passion? Please stand up and maybe we'll rock the stadium and our team will have an advantage. That doesn't work either. Everything about making the wave is about harnessing human energy. If a wave in the ocean, the physics of a wave is energy, then a wave with people is a human energy. And harnessing human energy is all about how you connect and enter their heart and give them the best reason of all to get out of their seat, even if there's a hot dog or popcorn on it, which is they believe. Now, every one of these football coaches was a traditional command and control coach. Look at all of them scowling or yelling. But they were winners. They won the Super Bowl. Not easy to do. If you go back 15 years to about 8 years, every winner of the Super Bowl was a known command and control coach. And these are the last 8 winners. Tony Dungy writes about faith in the locker room being a quiet strength. Pete Carroll has a human performance enhancement optimizer specialist. I just read about this. It's incredible what's going on. And Tom Coughlin, Tiki Barber, went on national TV and called him a distant dictatorial figure. His grandkids said, "What is I saying about you?" And he went on a journey of transformation because most of the coaches are younger and they're coming up the ranks without the old habits of command and control, and they found new ways to relate. Some of the older coaches, Pete Carroll was fired, are going on a personal journey of transformation, and they are letting go of command and control, and they are starting. Tom Coughlin put a leadership council in the locker room when he let the players make more decisions, and he's won 2 Super Bowls since that transformational event. There hasn't been a major championship won in sports, soccer, hockey, baseball. Look at the San Francisco Giants in this town with a traditional old school coach. And they were great coaches. It just doesn't resonate today. Jill Ellis won the World Cup after just 14 months coaching the team. And if you read about her, she's considered a humanist, and her entire ethos of coaching is making everything a two-way conversation. There are so many CEOs out there, and I'm not holding them out as beacons or icons. I'm saying, what is it about John Chambers to say we need to kill command and control? What is it about Ginny Rometty at IBM saying, don't ask me about my strategy, ask me what I believe? You're seeing a trend of leaders saying, at least we are going to attempt to let loose of top-down power because it doesn't work in favor of a more connected, humanistic approach. If there's ever a point in this talk where you might be inclined to write something down, it would be right now. I'm going to make this really simple. There's only 3 ways to get another human being to do something. You can coerce them, you can motivate them, or you can inspire them. Coercion and motivation are outside of you, and they happen to you. Carrots and sticks extract performance from you and allegiance from you. I've never seen somebody, if you give somebody 8 carrots, i.e. a bonus, they give you 8 parts motivation. And I don't see many people share their bonus with somebody else, but they can share a mission and values with somebody else. I am all for coercion. There should be fireable offenses. But let them be in the woodwork. But they shouldn't inform 95% of why we do what we do, maybe just 5%. I'm all for motivation, especially in this part of the world. We are out motivating people. Let's make more money doing the right things. But we need to think about the limitations of carrots and sticks. And the real opportunity is to create a cocktail of coercion and motivation and inspiration, because inspiration comes from in us. And what's in us? Our deepest beliefs, our values, missions worthy of us. And I think right now, the behaviors we want cannot be coerced or motivated. They can only be inspired, because only inspired leadership and conduct elevates another human being. This is so much so that even the United States military, they have officially in Fort Jackson changed their crest, their motto. Amateurs motivate, professionals inspire. It used to take them 80 bullets to zero a rifle when a drill sergeant is yelling at you, "My mother can do better than this." And now it's down to 35 bullets in a more collaborative approach. Because we don't want soldiers to just be out there as killing machines and implementers, people who take kills. We want soldiers to earn respect and trust in villages, because the world is so networked and connected. We want elevated behaviors from everybody, even the military. I am all for power. I'm all for authority. I don't believe you can have a world without power and authority. The point I'm making is that formal authority, as my son has just taught me, do this because I'm your dad, or do this because I say so, or do this because I know that you know that you know that I know that I fill out your performance evaluation and I determine your bonus. There's too much freedom from today, formal authority. Formal authority is dissipating and decaying, power over people. It just doesn't work. But moral authority is having a renaissance and a real comeback, because in the vacuum of freedom from, it's being filled with that which inspires freedom too, which is moral authority. Nelson Mandela had more of it in his pinky than most people in power, in official power have. Frankly, I think Mark Benioff deserves acknowledgement for the moral authority of putting philanthropy as an ethos into the centrality of Salesforce's DNA from day one, and recently to take a stance on religious freedom laws and on equal pay in the workforce. That is moral authority taking a stance of societal significance, and others are following him. But this is the leadership that these young children are demanding and showing, and this is the leadership that we are getting from those in leadership today. As I wrap up, I'm going to ask you the simplest question of all. Who wants progress? Everybody, right? You would agree that to have progress, we need to innovate. We need to do something different or better than before. That's our IP. IP is innovation leading to progress or prosperity. But when do people innovate? What has to be true? Somebody has to take a risk. If somebody speaks in a meeting with a superior, they're taking the risk that he or she will think they're a bozo. If we spend some money, you're taking the risk of not getting a return. Sometimes we're not mindful that risk is what enables innovation. You know how many innovation programs hit walls and fail at companies because we don't step back and say, how do we create the conditions for people to take the risk to innovate? And so far I spelt RIP, rest in peace. Because when do people take risk? When there's an abundance of trust. We so much focus on innovation as opposed to creating the conditions that inspire innovation. It's called going on a trip. Trust leads to risk-taking, which leads to innovation and progress. Now, we've been taught to go looking for trust and verify. Can we trust this person? Let's negotiate contracts for 6 months to put all these clauses because we don't trust them, as opposed to getting on with it. The first philosopher that talked about trust was Aristotle. The virtue of trust does not lie in somebody else. It lies in the person giving it away. Because when you extend trust to somebody else, you elevate them, because when you give trust away, you are taking the risk by giving them the power to do right by you or betray you. So we have been taught to go looking for trust, but the virtue of trust lies in giving it away. When the rock band Radiohead trusted their fans to pay what they thought the music was worth, they made more money in that fifth album than the first four put together when they put a price on it. In Indonesia, there's so much corruption that they started to run out of police, the more traditional command and control, and they launched over 10,000 honesty cafes where they taught citizens to take food off the shelves and go to a jar and make their own change and not have a transaction. Domino's was getting really hurt out in the marketplace. Their stock was down. They trusted their customers with the truth. They said their pizza sucks. They filmed videos of their own people eating their pizza saying, this tastes like cardboard, and they put it on their website, and they said, we agree this stuff sucks, but we are on a journey to be better, and their stock is up fivefold because they trusted people with the truth. Trust is a neuromodulator. When you receive trust, oxytocin is released in your brain. Literally, it's the bonding drug. It's a legal performance-enhancing drug. Trust. A legal performance-enhancing drug. So much so that even though trust is high in only 11% of organizations, if you can make trust high, you don't get 22% more, you get 22x more rational risk-taking that leads to innovation and financial performance. Think of that. Trust. If I were to conclude where I began by highlighting again that our business problem is a human problem, people leaning out and not being on a trip. We studied that. We took the 9 or so criteria that everybody agrees make for an engaged employee. They release discretionary effort. They want to be at their company in 12 months. They'll recommend their friend to the company. And we looked at what has to be true for people to be engaged in these ways. And if you see, it turns out that when trust fundamentally is high, when the organization doesn't just have values, it is values-based. Values literally are the reason behaviors happen as they do. And there is a purpose-inspired mission. And that people feel that this purpose calls forth who they are, and that these values are ones that they can sign up for, and that those around them are behaving in ways that extend trust so that people are free to be themselves. 7 to 9 of these criteria appear. You not only get engaged employees, you get super engaged employees. Is it fair to say that as we look ahead, if we were going to make some of these changes, it kind of feels like we're going to have to go on some form of journey, right? Would you agree that life is a journey? Yes? Why? Because it goes, what? Not a destination. What makes our life a journey is they go up and down. They zig and zag. Our health goes up and down. Our friendships, we think we know something, then we get confused, then we know it again. We are great in our personal lives at going up and down. Great at it. You know what business did? They said business is not a journey because the business of business is just business. Through control, planning, and budgeting, we are going to superimpose linearity. All profits have to go up. Everything needs to go up in a straight line. When we landed on the moon, DuPont made 24 out of 25 elements of Neil Armstrong's spacesuit. A company went to the moon with the country because it was on a journey. And we've stopped journeying in business. But if life and business are fusing, then business needs to get back to being on a journey. And you know what this part of the world taught the world? Pivoting. Pivoting is what you do on a journey because you put one foot in your values and who you are and what you stand for, and you put one foot forward. And journeys are about progress, and journeys are about how, and journeys are about how you inspire others to stay connected to you when you're down so that you could be up again together. And these journeys are really about the leadership journey. It first starts with an inner journey to pause, who am I, what do I stand for, and how do I turn that into an outer journey? And I don't have 7 habits of highly successful how people. It's a way of feeling, believing, and behaving, and you get to innovate and do it in ways that are totally unique to you. But it comes down to how do we do what we do so that we can engender such an abundance of trust, such a values-based culture that gets out of bed to do something of valuable in the world, and then you will have a wave that you can only imagine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
They're bringing chairs out for us. Dov, that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for that. You know, there were so many things you said that were interesting, and it's really aspirational, though. This whole message you're giving about the kind of businesses and organizations that we think we really need that are going to function in this modern world. I was really gratified when you showed the slide that showed the CEOs don't get it, because I was thinking that throughout your talk, that this sounds right, but I just see so many organizations that aren't run this way. Yeah. So, I mean, when you run a company that tries to help companies get to this, what do you do to help concretely bring companies along this journey, as you put it?
Well, I try to enlist them in the view that this is a systems problem, and there are 3 systems that bear on behavior. Governance, the rules, the policies, the procedures, how money is made, bears on behavior. Culture bears on behavior. Who were we on our best day? What is our story? What are we about? How do things really happen around this place? Bears on behavior. And leadership bears on behavior. And you've got to get the 3 in sync, because there are CEOs that say, I trust you to innovate. The person runs off to innovate. And then they got to get 3 signatures to spend $6 to innovate.
So it's an organizational challenge.
It's an organizational, it's a human design problem, because you could say to somebody, if you trust this, if you love your company, go on Facebook, and you've written so brilliantly about Facebook, go on Facebook and defend us. But then there's a social media policy that says pretty much they'll go onto Facebook.
Yeah, or even don't use Facebook at work.
Don't use Facebook at all. So this is these CEOs have a bigger problem. It's not just their head is in the sand. They have a huge systems problem, because there are 2 types of behavior: required behavior, what you must and must not do, and inspired behavior. And we scaled 2 systems that are in a schizophrenic relationship. And we now need to innovate and create better organizations.
It's also interesting you showed Paul Pullman, because Unilever is a company I know a lot about. I have tremendous admiration for him, and he is really an inspired, enlightened leader, there's no question. But he runs a company with, I don't know how many, probably well over 100,000 employees, probably several hundred thousand. And, you know, all these middle managers, and to really bring about the kind of changes that he believes in, he's got to more or less lead this whole army in a new direction of, whether you call it inspiration, whatever you call it, it's a very different way of thinking. And it's really hard for leaders of organizations of that scale. But I wanted to just slightly make a
and if
point
you want,
related
we can talk about why I think he's doing it.
Okay, quickly give me that, because I want to go back to Facebook for a second.
Well, he went to Wall Street, and he said no more quarterly guidance, and people think he's fighting Wall Street. No, by fighting with Wall Street, he was telling his 160,000 colleagues, I'm giving you freedom to think long term. That was a message to his people. If no more quarterly guidance, let's all think long term. The other thing he did, he came up with a sustainable living plan. And he said over the next 10 years, we are going to double revenue, okay? But we are going to decrease our environmental footprint by 50%. Not a 6-month program, not a 2-year program. When was the last time a US president talked about a 10-year journey? When Kennedy said we're going to land on the moon, what inspired me is not that we're going to land on the moon. He said within a decade. And today, CEOs need to scale what they're doing to the magnitude of what they're trying to do, and they need to go on a 5 to 10-year journey.
Another CEO of a pretty big company, not as big as Unilever, that is very values-driven, that has also decided to stop giving quarterly guidance to Wall Street, is Aetna. Mark Bertolini, quite an astonishing leader. It was actually speaking at a conference that I organized in Detroit just yesterday. And he was amazing, the things he said, you know, wearing his black onyx skull ring and all kinds of things. But I wanted to talk about Facebook for a minute, because, you know, there's a company I know very well. I wrote a book about it, and it's I think most people would agree that one of the most astonishingly successful leaders in business today is Mark Zuckerberg. And anybody who knows him well will attest to the degree to which he is values-driven. And it's something that a lot of people looking at the company from the outside fail to understand, but it helps explain how they got to 1.5 billion users in just a little over 11 years. the values that he lives and breathes a vision of connecting the world. And sometimes people think it's all about selling advertising. That is not what motivates him. And he has done an extraordinary job explaining to his entire company that this is what drives him, and he wants this to drive them as well. And I'm sure you've observed that yourself.
Not only that, the journey he's been on of his own leadership, and being inspirational to others by being open and vulnerable about his own maturation.
Well,
as a leader.
recently he's done that quite a bit. Yeah,
Quite a
talking
bit.
about the miscarriages his wife had and everything.
He's modeling transparency, but he did one more thing. Recently, I don't know if you've read, he's engineering an empathy button, not a dislike button. Now, I find that interesting. The easiest thing for them
He hasn't said what it's going to be, really.
but he's talking about it as an empathy. He's saying, I don't
It
want
would be
people-
nice if he could have an empathy button, yeah.
It'd be
That's
really
gonna
nice.
hard to
He's
do.
saying, I don't want an up-down society that's too reductionist, and I'm going to see if I can create some way for people to express empathy and compassion.
But you know, you and I talked in February, whenever I came over to your office, and you were talking about how tech companies have such a huge challenge today because their platforms are now shaping behavior.
Yes.
And they have to maintain, as you called it, moral neutrality, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And Facebook has got that challenge with,
Big time.
in fact, the discussion about this new button really has made me think a lot about the like button. It's such a flat-footed form of communication. It's like the only way we have to express, you know, with a click, something about anything that's on Facebook. I mean, we could write something, but, you know, really we need a language that is maybe a language of clicks or something, because a lot of people don't want to write. And
Right.
to think that there's just going to be one other or even two or three other forms of expression that, you know, maybe go alongside the like, it puts way too much responsibility on that company, which has an enormous role in modern global communication, to be sort of guiding our moral and our human behavior. I think it's almost impossible for them to do
I
that
don't think they should
successfully,
guide
to
it.
be honest.
I don't think they should guide it, but maintaining moral neutrality. In Internet 1.0, because most of the platforms were about words, people put reviews on the site. What was happening on the platforms were words, reviews, et cetera, and blogs and posts. So the First Amendment sensibility really permeated. And so people said, I'm just a platform for words. But now that these platforms are bringing handyman into your house and people into your cars and into your homes, and you are creating new behaviors, strangers are coming into intimate proximity. I think for tech companies to maintain this, we're just an app.
Yeah.
That's not working. Look at the struggles that Uber and Airbnb are having. So I think tech companies are going to have to find a way to participate, not necessarily guide, but do something more than saying we're just an app.
Well, it's just interesting, we don't have tons of time, but to integrate this with one of the things that was announced in the keynote here today, this very interesting movement towards the Internet of Things at Salesforce. And if you think about the challenges that brings to companies of all types, literally any kind of company in a world where everything is connected, has to be sensitive to a much broader range of actions and behaviors.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be, the issues you've been talking about here are going to get much, much harder for companies in that world.
David, I think you're right on the issue. If the only reason somebody works at a company is what they're paid, they should leave if somebody pays them more. If the only reason you buy is price, you should leave if somebody can undercut them. So right now, all relationships are being revealed and exposed. So we are looking for something deeper to hang on. We're looking for human glue.
Right.
And when people share values and a sense of purpose, they hang together. So I actually think in a reshaped world, values are the glue that is better at creating a bond than anything else. And that's why they're starting to make it into business.
Well, I'm glad you're talking about it because you're totally right. And thank you for saying it. And thank you for being here. Great.
Thank you, David. Thank you.